Have you ever wondered what happens when someone gives a chance to those everyone else has given up on? This story might just change how you see both farming and our veterans. I'm about to tell you the incredible true story of John Mahoney, a farmer from rural Nebraska who took a chance that nobody else would. When his farm was on the brink of collapse due to labor shortages, he made a decision that not only saved his livelihood but created a ripple effect reaching all the way to the Pentagon. And wait until you hear what happened when the Secretary of Defense's motorcade made an unexpected stop on a dusty country road. The moment that changed everything wasn't what anyone expected. It all started in the spring of 2023. John Mahoney stood in his fields looking at acres of crops that needed tending, but with no workers to help him. The 58-year-old third-generation farmer had watched as the younger generation abandoned rural communities for city life, leaving agricultural regions across America struggling with critical labor shortages. "I was about ready to sell everything," John told me when I visited his 400-acre farm. "My son had moved to Chicago for a tech job, my daughter was in medical school in Boston, and I couldn't find reliable help to save my life." John had tried everything, offering higher wages, posting job listings online, even reaching out to temporary work agencies. Nothing worked. The few workers he managed to hire would quit within weeks, unprepared for the physical demands and early mornings that farming requires. His neighbor Frank had already sold his family farm to a large agricultural corporation the previous year. The writing was on the wall for small family operations like John's that couldn't compete with industrial-scale farming without adequate labor. But John wasn't ready to give up just yet. The Mahoney farm had weathered the Dust Bowl, the farm crisis of the 1980s, and countless droughts and floods. There had to be a solution. The idea came to him during a Veterans Day parade in nearby Lincoln. John watched as veterans from various conflicts marched past, some in wheelchairs, others with prosthetic limbs or walking with canes. "I noticed how disciplined they all were, how they held themselves with such dignity despite their injuries," John recalled. "And then it hit me, these were exactly the kind of dedicated people I needed. People who understood hard work, who wouldn't quit when things got tough." That evening, John reached out to James Wilson, a friend who worked at the local VA hospital. He asked a simple question: would disabled veterans be interested in farm work if he could adapt his operation to accommodate their physical limitations? James was skeptical at first. "I told him farming is physically demanding. Many of our vets have mobility issues, missing limbs, chronic pain. How would that work?" But John was already thinking ahead. "I've got machinery gathering dust in my barn that could be modified. My grandfather adapted everything during World War II when workers were scarce. If he could do it then, I can do it now." What John did next was nothing short of revolutionary in the farming community. He took out a second mortgage on his house and invested nearly $200,000 in modifying his equipment. He installed hydraulic lifts on tractors so they could be operated from wheelchairs. He created extended controls for those with limited arm mobility. He even developed a system of raised beds for crops that required close attention, making them accessible to workers who couldn't bend or kneel. With his farm retooled, John approached the VA with his proposal: a program to train and employ disabled veterans in sustainable agriculture. He called it Valor Harvest. The VA was interested but cautious. Programs attempting to reintegrate veterans into the workforce had varying success rates. Many veterans faced invisible challenges beyond their physical disabilities, PTSD, depression, and difficulty adjusting to civilian life. "We've had companies make big promises before," explained Maria Gonzalez, the local VA employment coordinator. "They hire a few vets for good PR, then let them go when accommodating their needs becomes inconvenient." John assured her this wasn't a publicity stunt. "I need workers or I lose my farm. These veterans need meaningful work. It's that simple." The VA agreed to a pilot program. They would refer 5 veterans to John's farm for a 3-month trial. If it worked, they would expand the program. The first 5 veterans arrived in April 2023. There was Mike, a former Army sergeant who lost his right leg in Afghanistan; Sarah, an ex-Navy mechanic with severe back injuries from a helicopter crash; Carlos, a Marine who suffered burns over 40% of his body; Derek, an Army specialist with shrapnel wounds that limited use of his left arm. And Taylor, an Air Force veteran, whose PTSD made it difficult for her to work in enclosed spaces or crowded environments. The beginning was rough. The veterans weren't used to the early mornings and the physical demands of farm work, even with the modifications. 2 weeks in, Carlos was ready to quit. "I just couldn't see how someone like me could be useful on a farm," he admitted later. "My hands can't grip tools properly because of the scar tissue. I felt like I was holding everyone back." But John wouldn't let him give up. He worked with Carlos to design special gloves that improved his grip and assigned him to manage the farm's new computerized irrigation system, which played to his technical skills from the military. Slowly, the group began to find their rhythm. John was surprised to discover that his new employees brought skills he hadn't anticipated. Mike had been a logistics specialist in the Army and completely reorganized the farm's storage systems, increasing efficiency by nearly 30%. Sarah's mechanical knowledge meant they rarely had to call for outside repair services. Derek proved to have an almost supernatural ability to predict weather patterns, a skill he developed during desert deployments. And Taylor, despite her PTSD, found that the open spaces of the farm and the repetitive, mindful work of tending plants actually helped manage her symptoms better than any therapy she'd tried. "Working with living things gives you purpose," she explained. "When you plant something and watch it grow, it's healing. You're creating life instead of being surrounded by destruction." By the end of the 3-month trial, John's farm was running more efficiently than it had in years. The VA was impressed, and word began to spread. Other veterans started showing up, asking if there were positions available. John expanded the program, bringing on 5 more veterans that summer. He converted an unused barn into accessible housing so veterans from further away could work there during the growing season. The local community college heard about what he was doing and offered to create a specialized agricultural training program for veterans in partnership with John's farm. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The farm faced financial challenges as John had invested heavily in equipment modifications. Some veterans struggled with their disabilities on difficult days, and not everyone in the farming community was supportive. "I heard plenty of comments," John acknowledged. "People saying I was wasting my time, that disabled vets couldn't handle real farm work, that I was setting myself up for failure." These criticisms reached a peak when a severe storm hit in August, flooding parts of the farm and threatening to destroy a significant portion of the harvest. The local farming association offered emergency assistance to affected farms in the region, but initially passed over John's operation. "They figured we couldn't respond quickly enough because of our limitations," Mike said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "They counted us out without even asking if we needed help." What happened next became local legend. The veterans organized themselves with military precision. Using their combined experience in crisis response and adaptation, they worked through the night to build drainage channels and save most of the crops. Sarah rigged pumps from spare parts when the regular ones failed. Carlos used his knowledge of water flow from desert operations to design efficient drainage paths. Derek predicted exactly when the rain would stop, allowing them to time their efforts perfectly. By morning, when other farmers were just beginning their damage assessment, John's farm had already secured most of its harvest. The neighboring farms watched in amazement as the team of disabled veterans outperformed able-bodied crews in both speed and effectiveness. "That was the turning point," John said. "That's when people stopped seeing them as disabled veterans I hired out of charity and started seeing them as possibly the best farm crew in the county." The program continued to grow. By the end of 2023, 15 veterans were working at Valor Harvest, with another 10 in training. The farm's productivity had increased by 25%, and they were experimenting with new high-value crops that John had never been able to manage with limited labor before. The veterans themselves were transforming too. Many who had been isolated and struggling to find their place in civilian society now had purpose, community, and income. Some moved permanently to the area, renting or buying homes nearby. A few even started bringing their families to community events, becoming integrated into rural life in a way that surprised even them. "Before this, I was just existing," said Derek. "Taking my meds, going to therapy, watching TV. I didn't think I had anything to offer anymore. Now I know that's not true. I'm needed here." The story might have remained a local success if not for what happened in February 2024. That's when Defense Secretary Lloyd Wilson was traveling through Nebraska after visiting Offutt Air Force Base. His motorcade was taking a rural route to avoid interstate construction when one of the vehicles developed engine trouble. The convoy pulled over near John's farm. Protocol dictated that they secure the area while waiting for a replacement vehicle. Secret Service agents fanned out, including onto John's property. When they encountered veterans working in the fields, there was initial confusion. The agents weren't expecting to find former military personnel in this remote location, but recognition quickly set in as the veterans identified themselves. What happened next was unplanned. One of the Secret Service agents, himself a veteran, mentioned the situation to Secretary Wilson. Intrigued by reports of a farm staffed by disabled veterans, Wilson asked to meet them while they waited for the vehicle replacement. John was called from another field to greet the unexpected visitor. Not recognizing the secretary at first, he simply welcomed him as he would any visitor, offering coffee from a thermos. He didn't stand on ceremony, Secretary Wilson later recalled. He just treated me like any other person interested in his farm. That authenticity spoke volumes. For the next 45 minutes, traffic remained halted as Secretary Wilson toured the farm, speaking with the veterans about their experiences. He was particularly impressed by the modified equipment and how the veterans had adapted their military skills to agriculture. What I saw was innovation that could benefit both our veterans and our agricultural sector, Wilson said afterward. These individuals who had given so much to their country were finding new ways to serve and thrive. Before leaving, Secretary Wilson asked detailed questions about the program's structure, costs, and outcomes. He took notes on his phone and exchanged contact information with John. 3 weeks later, John received a call from the Department of Defense. Secretary Wilson had shared the Valor Harvest story with colleagues at the Pentagon and the Department of Agriculture. They wanted to explore creating a national program based on John's model. I thought it was a prank call at first, John admitted. Why would the Pentagon care about my little farm in Nebraska? But it wasn't a joke. By April 2024, John was in Washington, D.C., presenting his program to officials from multiple government agencies. By June, a pilot program was launched in 5 states, with plans to expand nationwide if successful. The program, officially named the Agricultural Training for Veterans Initiative, but commonly called Valor Harvest, after John's original project, received $50 million in initial funding. It covered equipment modifications, training programs, housing assistance, and healthcare coordination for participating veterans. For John, the recognition was nice but secondary to the real achievement, proving that, with the right adaptations and opportunities, disabled veterans could not only succeed in agriculture but excel at it. These men and women already have the core attributes farmers need, John explained during a media interview. Discipline, problem-solving skills, the ability to work under pressure, and understanding that some things like weather or plants are beyond your control. You adapt to what you can't change and work with what you have. The veterans themselves have become the program's best ambassadors. When new recruits arrive, often uncertain and doubtful of their abilities, the established team members take them under their wing. I tell them what Mike told me when I first got here, said Taylor. Your disability isn't what defines your usefulness. It's just one part of the equation. Focus on what you can do, not what you can't. The program has had profound effects beyond employment metrics. Local VA counselors report significant improvements in mental health outcomes for veterans participating in the program. Suicide risk factors decreased, while measures of life satisfaction and purpose increased dramatically. There's something healing about working with the land, explained Dr. Jennifer Morrison, a VA psychologist who has studied the program. Add in the camaraderie these veterans find with each other, the sense of purpose in producing food, and the respect they earn in their communities. It's a powerful combination for psychological well-being. The rural community around John's farm has been transformed as well. With new residents moving in, the local school that had been threatened with closure due to declining enrollment now has enough students to remain open. The general store added inventory to serve the veterans' families. A new restaurant opened in town, co-owned by 2 of the veterans who discovered a passion for cooking with fresh farm produce. It's like watching a dying town come back to life, said Alina Matthews, who runs the local post office. We were losing people every year, especially young folks. Now we've got new families, new businesses, new energy. The most unexpected outcome has been the technical innovation spurred by the program. The equipment modifications originally designed for disabled veterans have proven useful for aging farmers as well. A company now manufactures and sells the adaptations John pioneered, helping older farmers extend their careers. Farming has one of the oldest average ages of any profession in America, explained agricultural economist Dr. Robert Chen. These adaptations could help address the demographic crisis in farming by allowing older farmers to work comfortably for more years. 1 year after Secretary Wilson's convoy made that unexpected stop, John's original 15 veterans have been joined by 30 more. The farm has expanded to include neighboring properties that would have otherwise been sold to corporate interests. They now produce 20 different crops, raise heritage breed livestock, and operate a small processing facility that allows them to sell value-added products directly to consumers. The waiting list for the program has grown to over 300 veterans nationwide. Similar programs have started in 22 states, with international interest from Canada, Australia, and the United Kingdom. John, now something of a celebrity in agricultural and veteran circles, remains humble about his role. "I didn't do anything special," he insists. "I just had a problem that needed solving, and I found people who had the skills to help. The fact that they had disabilities was secondary to what they could contribute." The veterans see it differently. At a recent harvest celebration, they presented John with a plaque that now hangs in the farm's main office. It reads simply, "To the man who saw our abilities when others only saw our disabilities." As for Secretary Wilson, he's become a champion for the program within the government. During a recent budget hearing, when questioned about the cost of the initiative, he responded with what has become a defining quote: "We spend billions preparing these men and women for war. Surely we can invest millions in preparing them for peace." The story of Valor Harvest continues to evolve. What began as one farmer's desperate attempt to save his livelihood has become a movement redefining both agricultural labor and veterans' reintegration. It proves that sometimes the most powerful solutions come from seeing potential where others see only problems. In John's words, "Every seed looks like nothing much when you plant it, but give it what it needs: the right soil, water, sunlight, and care, and it will show you what it's capable of becoming. People aren't so different." That unexpected meeting on a country road, when traffic stopped for the defense secretary's convoy, was just the beginning. The real journey continues with each veteran who finds new purpose and each crop that reaches harvest, a proof that sometimes our greatest limitations can lead to our most innovative solutions. If this story of veterans finding new purpose touched you, click the subscribe button and check out my next video about how a homeless veteran's cardboard sign led to a multi-million-dollar business that's changing lives across America.